Okay, so that should be us going live. So you might get just a little feedback here in a second before I can mute my YouTube here. So, all right, so the live stream is setting up. Excellent, so now we are actually live. And there's Mark. Good afternoon, Mark. Sorry, good evening. So hopefully you're going to have better weather for the eclipse than we're going to be a little dodgy here.
They're saying that it's supposed to be clear, rain Sunday morning, so we'll see what happens. If it is clear, I'll have wind, which is not good.
Yeah, well, for those who don't know, Mark does not live in our immediate area, so he lives about 1,500 miles away. So
yeah, we're dealing with all the wildfire smoke right now too.
Well, welcome everybody to the May meeting of the Grand Strand Astronomers. So I appreciate everybody joining. So again, I apologize that we couldn't do the meeting face to face. That's just my scheduling issues. So I don't anticipate a lot of those, but sometimes it will come up. With all the rain here, fortunately, I guess that's convenient for everybody not having to drive, especially for Mark, because it's a long drive for him. Again, this is our regular indoor meeting where we normally have one indoor meeting a month where we talk things astronomy. And then we have one outdoor observing session, which we've been doing at Hampton Plantation. I know Gerald's not here, but we had our last one on April 30th out there on Saturday. Gerald and I went out. It was actually really successful. We had about 20 or more people actually show up wanting to see things. So it's a good thing we had 2 telescopes out there. We had one family even drive from Florence specifically for the session. So, it turns out that, seeing was not supposed to be, or transparency was not supposed to be great. Seeing was very good, but it turned out to be actually an excellent night. So we did get a chance to, you could see a lot of galaxies are really clear. And a lot of clusters. So we actually had, the galaxies actually look decent, like M81 and M82, even though the transparency was down. They were pretty good. So we actually had a really good night out there. I would encourage everybody to join our observing sessions. Now, as far as going from here on out, observing sessions, our plan is to still go ahead and kind of roll the dice in May on observing session at Hampton Plantation. Now, for those of you that haven't been out to Hampton Plantation, it is plenty dark. Unfortunately, the bugs also get pretty excessive in the summer out that way. They do spray for them. So we're going to take a chance in May and see how it works out. It was not too bad at all when we were out there, again, April 30th. So we're gonna go ahead and try in May. As far as doing, I've got a date scheduled in June. As far as whether we hold that, it's kind of going to depend on whether, the conditions, if it's just insane with the bugs, like, we don't want to pick up your telescope and carry it away, right? But we'll play that by ear. But right now we're going to plan on doing it in May. So hopefully we'll have good weather. So I would encourage everybody to come out. It is nice and dark out there. So it is well worth coming out. So there's that. We'll again, of course, continue to have our meetings. The other thing I wanted to talk about tonight, of course, was the eclipse, since that's kind of the thing of the moment, right? So I went ahead and prepared a little information if everybody wants to see it. It shouldn't take very long. It's what I know about the eclipse. I'm not an expert on eclipses, but I know a little bit about it. So, so I would encourage everybody to go to the website like mreclipse.com or eclipsespies.com. It leads you to the same place, where that's a former NASA astrophysicist who has like everything about eclipses at that site. So yeah, Mr. Eclipse is definitely the way to go. So it's a really good way to get information about pretty much every eclipse. But I also thought I'd kind of talk a little bit about shooting the eclipse. I was going to try to get a friend of mine who's an expert photographer to talk about it. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it tonight, but I will schedule him for another meeting to talk about, he shoots a lot with like a DSLR and does really, really great work. Unfortunately, this particular date was not good for a lot of the people that I know that are good at that. So I'll talk a little about that. Because the good news is lunar eclipses are some of the easiest things to shoot, right? So if you want some good astro photos, this is a good time to get them. So let me see if I can share my screen. And if you can't see my screen, let me know. So hopefully everybody sees that. So yeah. Okay, got it. Okay, great. Sorry, I've got multiple screens showing different views of the meeting, so I apologize. Kind of, if I look at more than one thing at once, I get confused, right? So I thought I'd just talk about shooting the lunar eclipse, and the image down there at the bottom is one I took, and I'll actually show that in a second. So of course, I think everybody on here knows what a lunar eclipse is all about, right? It's the Earth. It's like the moon passing through the Earth's shadow. Right? It doesn't happen all the time because the orbit of the moon is tilted with respect to the orbit of the Earth around the sun. So it just kind of has to configure just right. This one actually happens to be on what's called the descending node. So it's actually, the moon's actually crossing from being above the plane of the orbit from the Earth and sun and going below it, right? So so it has to pass through their shadow. There's two parts of the shadow. There's a penumbra and the umbra. And just I like this picture on here because it's actually, let me see if I can fire up my pen. As people like Gavin know, I know Gavin's been in my classes. I love to write on my slides. The penumbra is the section out here. And so that's not nearly as dark. And the umbra is what gives you the really nice dark red. That's the deep part of the Earth's shadow. So and this is just kind of a nice little, again, from all this is from MrEclipse.com, Fred Espenek. Again, I really recognize MrEclipse.com or EclipseWise.com as a source of information. So here's the deal on ours, right? It's going to be technically the height of it is on May 16th, which is Monday morning, but it's actually very late Sunday night. This is actually kind of cool because it's what's called a central eclipse. And the reason they call it a central eclipse is the moon passes through the center point of the umbra, the Earth's shadow. So it would not be a central eclipse if it didn't, because sometimes it'll pass through various parts of the shadow. Sometimes maybe only partially, but even if it passes completely through, it can get through without passing the central point. The good news is we get to see all of it. So this area of the white is where everybody gets to see it from beginning to end. So that's the good news for us this time. Sometimes there's one coming up, I think, on November 8th, I think. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that I think will be you'll have to get up early in the morning, and then mid eclipse, you'll basically get sunrise in mid eclipse. Basically the moon will go down so basically the moon will go down at that point. So you'll get only part of it. So you just have to get up really early for that one. This one's actually a lot better because the central part, or the deepest part of the eclipse, will be a little after midnight our time. It says 12:13 here. I've also seen 12:11. So he's got a delta T of plus or minus 70 seconds. So call it 412, right? 412 to 414, right? Here's a little bit more data on the eclipse. And again, you can get all these online. This gives you the times. So what you'll be able to see is it kind of starting what they call P1, or so it starts entering the penumbra, just the first contact with the penumbra. So let me come over here and my mouse is giving me a fits here. Basically when the edge of the moon first hits the penumbra, it'll be 9:31 at night, Sunday night. Sorry, was that a question?
No.
I just tend to get talking, and so that's why So about 10:27 is when it will first hit the umbra, and then it'll be completely covered over in the umbra by 11:28. Again, the central part of the ellipse, so the greatest eclipse, is like going to be about 12:11. So, a little after midnight, right? And as you can see, the total event, is actually the total the time of totality is actually 1 hour and 25 minutes. So, the good news about it is if you get a cloud, it's not like a solar eclipse where you get one passing cloud and it kind of screws you up completely, right? You should be able to get a view of it, right? You should be able to get a view. That's a pretty long window, even if we have partial clouds. So it should pop out. And you see the total eclipse time it takes to go through the penumbra is over 5 hours. So, but really the umbral part, and really the totality is absolutely the best part, right? And then the umbral part, but then when it gets to the penumbra, it's not that spectacular. So you can see by that it pretty much pops out completely, before the night is through and you're kind of done. So that's kind of what it's going to look like. As far as the forecast, it depends on who you ask, right? I was watching Ed Piotrowski not long ago. Of course, one of our local weather celebrities who's very well respected, and he was saying that he thinks it's going to be maybe partly cloudy, but you still be able to see it. I kind of looked at the atmospheric forecast, and this is the latest one as of this afternoon. And it kind of shows, it kind of shows clouds in and out, right? So that's kind of holding right there. Of course, if you look at AccuWeather, they also have they publish some cool stuff. One of the things they were publishing is a prediction about whether it's going to be good or not. I tend to think this is it tends to be a little optimistic, on the optimistic side, but okay, always glass half full. It says we're going to have good conditions, so we'll see. All right, so it turns out mostly the poor conditions are going to be just farther up on the East Coast. So if you're in the Midwest, you're kind of like there's a section that's good, then there's a section that's kind of fair. So I think we got a chance of seeing something, although I don't think it's going to be like hours of looking at the eclipse and being able to see it. I think you're going to have to contend with some passing clouds. So that would be my guess, right? So the good news is it's great to image these things, right? So the beauty is you don't need any special filters, right? It's actually some of the easiest imaging you'll do. It's actually a really good target for like SLR style cameras. And that includes the new mirrorless ones as well, right? So you don't have to have like a dedicated CCD or CMOS. And there's no reason you couldn't use, with the right combination of equipment, you couldn't use one with a dedicated CCD or something. You certainly could use that. But actually, if you just have an SLR and you don't have to worry about having it modified so it has extra hydrogen alpha sensitivity, I mean, really just an off-the-shelf camera will work just fine, right? The other good news is, even though it's dim by the lunar standards, the regular moon's pretty bright. So, it's, even though it's dim, you don't need any strong tracking requirements, right? So you don't need like a mount that has really good tracking, or you're doing some kind of auto guiding or anything, right? But that being said, you will need a tripod. You can't shoot this by hand, right? Not realistically. You're going to need some kind of tripod. It doesn't have to be like, a super expensive $1,000 tripod, but going to need something, right? And ideally, you're going to want some kind of remote shutter, or if not, you're going to want to be able to, one of those cameras where you can set where it has the delay, so you can push the button and let it, so it stops shaking. I didn't put this on here, but the other thing is, what you don't want to do on a tripod, and I'm sure everybody knows this, is a lot of the modern lenses have the image stabilization built in. You absolutely do not want to use that on the tripod. You actually want to turn that off, because a lot of times it actually works against you on a tripod. It works very well handheld. Some of my IS lenses work pretty well handheld, but it absolutely can get pretty weird on a tripod. So that's something you actually really don't want to do. So, most lenses have the ability to turn that off, or most cameras have the ability to turn off the image stabilization. And so you probably want to do that. So in terms of taking pictures of the eclipse, right? You can take all kinds of pictures of the eclipse. It's pretty amazing all the things people do. So kind of depending on what equipment you have, right? Again, you really don't need to go nuts on equipment with this. That's actually one of the really fun parts about the lunar eclipse, right? Here's a wide field shot with a lunar eclipse, and actually you see Gemini up there on top. See Castor and Pollux up there, and so this is one that uses the background and uses a fairly wide lens. It's probably one of the easiest ones to shoot. Of course, the moon is relatively small, but at the same time, you can get a really cool background in there, or some, so some context here, and then you can get some stars and things like that. So these are fine if you want to do this kind of shot, right? So again, even if you only have a lens that's fairly wide, say like a 50 millimeter lens, or maybe something even a little smaller than that, you can certainly go ahead and shoot the moon, right? This particular one doesn't look too clear. That's probably just because of where I got the image. So just because you're shooting wide field doesn't necessarily make it kind of fuzzy. This one's actually might be a scope out of focus, but that's we'll talk about focus in a minute. That's more important than the type of equipment you use. But I've seen some really spectacular shots done with basically the kit lenses that come with the camera, right? So you don't need to buy a lot of expensive glass in order to get good shots. And I guess that's one of the important things, right? Now, other things are eclipse trails. And some people do this, and they'll just do a long exposure. This one on the left is from MrEclipse.com. I like this one on the right. This is from a friend of mine, Joe Pettit, and this was taken in Moncure, North Carolina, and of an eclipse. And it's actually pretty cool because you can see he used. It's pretty cool because you see how overexposed it is when the moon is fully bright, and then as it dims down, and dims down. You can see it gets very dim, and then it starts getting brighter and brighter as it starts coming out. And you can see all kinds of cool things, like you can see the star trails, and you can also see that he was able to capture the color of some of the stars, right? So I think this is actually an excellent picture. This actually, in fact, this one was so good it actually made the APOD, so the NASA APOD. So, but you can see he also kind of very carefully composed it. With like a tower in the background and its foreground. So this is you can get pretty creative with these things, and this is pretty straightforward to shoot. So I think it's kind of cool. The other ones I like are sequences, and again, I'm going to share one from Mr. Eclipse like I did before. This is a sequence from Maui, so we have a very nice place to shoot a eclipse from. And again, another one from North Carolina. This is Joe Pettit. And this is just a series of images, series of digital images taken, and they're all stacked together. And you can see that it goes all the way down to the deepest part of the eclipse, and kind of to where it's really coming out of the penumbra, right? And so you can kind of see that over that hour and 25 minutes, there'll be changes in the moon, right? It won't be consistent, right? Again, you get the deepest part of the eclipse right here when it's darkest, but then you'll see that the bright edge will slowly start growing as it's moving out, just like you'll see it shrinking when it's going in. So you will see changes over that hour and a half. So I would recommend, if it just starts at like 11:40, if you go look at it, go, oh, cool. Well, you can do that. That's fine. You go, that's cool. But at the same time, you don't, try to stay out till it gets to the deep eclipse, right? Because it'll still be worth it, right? So these sequences are, again, pretty easy to shoot, right? Of course, you can also do a close-up, okay? This is one I took, a few years ago. I don't know, so maybe 10 years ago, ish. And, it's one of those things that I've got that right over the center of it. It's one of those things that I took this with my telescope, and I just attached a DSLR to my telescope, and I just shot that. And this was actually taken under very suboptimal conditions. I was in the mall, a parking lot of a mall, a lot of light pollution. I was shooting over another mall. It was kind of, because I was up on one hill and I was shooting over the top of another mall. It was very low. It was very low to the horizon. So I was shooting between the power lines and the ground, and very, very unideal conditions for astrophotography, any kind of astrophotography. Yet it still turned out pretty well. So, again, if you have a telescope, you can hook that up to. Again, you don't want to go too much focal length, but it actually, you can get some really cool images.
Ian,
Yeah.
is that from the January 2019 eclipse?
No, it's older than that. It's I don't know. I think it's about 10 years old. Gosh, I'm trying to remember. That's a good question. Let me see if I can tell you. That's a great question. I should have looked that up beforehand, because I don't think I've touched the processing of it since.
The only reason why I know the date on the 2019 one is that my iPhone, I can flip up underneath the one I got and lets me what, like the time was 11:56 p.m. Gives me information like that when the picture was taken.
Actually, I'm sorry, you are absolutely correct. It is 2019, taken on 1/21/19 at 12:24 a.m.
Okay, right after I took mine.
Yeah. So, okay. So, thanks, Tom. You know my images better than I do. So, yeah. So actually, I actually did snap that. So, yeah. So it turns out you can take non-ideal conditions. You can get some really, really cool things. You can even see, like here, and you can see the rays coming off the crater here, and you can see the rays of Copernicus here, or sorry, Tycho here, coming out. So you get some really good detail. So any of these work, right? You can do just about anything. So one thing is you want to calculate your field of view, right? So there's a kind of a shortcut. You can do your focal length in millimeters and divide by 109 to give you an idea how big the moon is going to be on your sensor. And just for reference, most DSLR image sensors are generally about 22 millimeters, 22.2 by 14.8. And so this gives you the idea of the focal lengths and how big the moon is. So in terms of the size of the moon, right, in millimeters, that's fine. But you say, okay, well, how about degrees? Well, the moon's about a half a degree. So as you can see, by the time you get to 2,000 millimeters, you're pretty much filling up most of the sensor with the moon, right? So that may not be exactly what you want, right? So it kind of gives you an idea of how big the moon's going to be across your image. So based on what you've got, and again, it's basically what you want. There's two columns here. One is a full-size sensor if you get a full-size camera. Most of the digital cameras are not. They're APS, what's called APS-C, and so they have this smaller sensor. So you'll get a smaller field of view right off of that. Again, it's just kind of a ballpark, but it gives you an idea. Like if you say you've got a 200 millimeter lens, it gives you an idea of how big the moon's going to be, right? Or if you're hooking up to a telescope that's say like 600 millimeters focal length, you get the idea of how big the moon's going to be. How much on the sensor it's going to, how much room on the sensor it's going to take up. As far as exposure, you definitely want to bracket it, right? Because it turns out it's really, really hard to predict exactly how bright the moon is going to be for any given eclipse, especially near totality. There's a lot of people actually do a calculation. It's like called a Dajon number, and do a relative estimate of how bright it is, but you really don't know. So you definitely want to bracket your exposures. So it means, you pick what you think is going to be the ideal exposure and take some take some that are faster, and take some that are slower, right? Because you have an hour and a half, so take a bunch of pictures, and then you can process the best ones you want, right? Some people even try to put together HDR images. That's kind of really out of the realm of this presentation, but you can do that. To give you an idea, for the regular full moon, say you're using ISO 400, and you're using about f8, that's about 1/500th of a second. Will give you something that's properly exposed. And one of the things about you know, especially when you're using lenses, using the focal ratio of the lenses, a couple of things that kind of come into play when you use them. First is a lot of people say, well, you know, I just want to go be as efficient as possible and try to open it up all the way. And that's okay, but it turns out that many of them, especially that have a little bit longer focal length, actually work better or sharper if you go up one from their widest. So I know a number of the Canon lenses are like that. So you know, definitely. So like if it goes down to like, you know, f2.8, then you know, that's the lowest one. So then actually I would shoot it at f4, right? And you can go a little higher like f8. And one advantage of going to a higher focal length, especially on camera lenses, is it makes the focusing a little more forgiving, right? So you actually you know, it gives you just a little bit wider focus range, so you can hit tight focus without, you know, having to be quite as exact. So that's why a lot of people recommend f8. But again, kind of your mileage may vary, right? By the time you get down to the fully eclipsed moon, you go from that 1/500th of a second to anywhere from 1/4 to 4 seconds, right? Again, depending on a lot of things, you can use this table to figure that out. You know, a lot of people might want to go just to higher ISOs, you know, because of course you can do much faster exposure, and that's okay. But again, once you get past 400, you start getting a lot of compression in the dynamic range of the cameras, in the way they represent colors and everything. So, and then you also can get a lot more noise, especially kind of depending on the brand of camera you have. If you've got, say, like you've got a you know, a bit strong prosumer or a professional grade camera, you probably do a little bit better than if you've got like the regular, you know, like digital EOS Rebel type cameras, right? Because by the time you get to 1600, you start getting a lot of noise. So 400 is a pretty good compromise. So, and again, this table kind of just gives you an idea based on your F number and your ISO, you know, about where you might want to start taking your pictures or start your exposures. You know, so you know, I mean, he's got some really strong ones here, like, you know, 1 minute and all that, and he's got some really really high on this chart, some really high F numbers. Again, on camera lenses, I really wouldn't recommend going to these really high focal length numbers, because as you turn down, a lot of them have the like the diaphragm. And as you start cranking that down, you can start getting little spikes on the bright areas. That's something you see when you go to high F ratios in doing astrophotography with regular camera lenses. So again, I don't recommend you kind of go nuts with that. You know, again, if 4 or 8 is okay, I'd probably stick at 4. But you know, if you start really cranking it down, yes, it gets more forgiving on focus, but at the same time, it can start introducing artifacts, and you kind of hate to see that, right? Because those kind of artifacts are really hard to take out post-processing. So the other thing to consider is where you're going to take pictures. So I actually pulled up my friendly Stellarium here, which you notice, actually, I ran it to the totality. You know, Stellarium even knows that now. So it actually colored it, you know, made it nice, a nice little shade of red. So, and dimmed it way down, which I think is kind of cool. And so you'll notice a couple of things here. You notice that it's going to be almost due south at the point of totality. And the other thing is it's not that high. It's going to be about 34 degrees high. So that's like 3/5 up from the horizon, off the southern horizon, which means that in your camera, it's going to move pretty much east to west. It's going to look like it's moving east to west. But it also means that you're going to need a reasonable southern horizon to take pictures. This isn't like the ones that occur later in the winter, where a lot of times those are kind of going overhead. So they're really easy to shoot. This one's going to be just a little more challenging because of that. So if you're going to try to take pictures or go out and see it, you're going to want a decent southern horizon. Now, you don't have to go out to the beach where you can see it all the way down to the ocean. You don't need that much horizon, but you are going to need, you're not, if you have a lot of trees or something blocking your horizon, it's going to be a challenge. Mark, I have no
Question.
idea what it looks like for you. You'll have to run it through Stellarium for yourself, But generally, what you're going to see is this one is going to be a little bit lower. So when you're kind of planning your shots, kind of take that into account, right?
Question.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Tim. Yeah, I was out on my driveway 2 nights ago, just kind of practicing. That moon was almost straight up above me.
Yeah. Well, this is so it's not quite straight. 37 is not quite straight. It's about as high as Polaris, right?
Let's see. I don't know what to compare it with. I was.
Well, it would have been high overhead because it was going through Leo a couple nights ago. So your ecliptic would have been very high over the head where you're at.
Okay.
And the last night, the one down at Brita Bank was very high up also. You almost had to look almost straight up for it.
You're right. Correct.
I'm at 40 degrees north, so the moon will be substantially lower than what you guys will see on Sunday night. Actually, 42 degrees north.
And I'm about 32 where I'm at.
Yeah, we're about 33 here. So well, definitely run through your planning software to see where it's going to be. But these eclipses tend to be a little bit lower, so just bear that in mind.
Mm.
So all right, and so again, you'll see it move east to west, right? So as far as getting prepared, you want to test your setup in advance for sure. Definitely. I know. I guess Tom, that picture behind him was taken like last night or something, so he's been doing it. So definitely, you spend a little time testing it in advance instead of just going out somewhere at midnight and trying to set up all your equipment, right? And again, the main thing is focusing carefully. That's really probably the best thing to getting these good astro images. It's not really what lens you use or what telescope combination you use. It's more along the lines of focusing carefully, right? If you've got live view, that makes it a lot easier. Once you get your focus dialed in, I kind of recommend like carefully putting a piece of tape or something on the focus ring so you don't knock it, because that's really easy to do. The beauty is it doesn't have to be focusing on the moon. You can actually focus on a bright star if that makes it easier. And again, take some time to do that. If your camera does, if your live view does like that zoom, or to go like 10 times zoom, and definitely do that and kind of just go into focus and then go past it a little bit and come back, and that'll give you an idea of where the focus really is. So do not rely on autofocus. Autofocus just just does not tend to work very well, and even if it does get somewhere close, it's only going to be somewhere close. So that's really my strong recommendation, right, is to actually just do the manual focusing. Once you get it dialed in, carefully put a piece of tape on it. And then, while imaging, just remember it is a long event, right? The good news is it's not like a solar eclipse where you're like racing the clock and any problem is going to throw you off, right? And just be aware the color can change a lot during totality, right? So, again, just don't take one shot at the beginning and go, hey, I'm done, right? I'm going to bed. But you also want to mind the motion of the Earth, right? So, with a 50 millimeter lens, you can do like around 8 to 10 seconds without any kind of trailing or any kind of smearing or anything. But by the time you're up at 150 to 300 millimeters, you're only at 1 to 2 seconds max. So you do need to account for that. If you're going to use these longer focal length lenses, then you got to be careful not to run your exposures too long, right? So you really start bumping into that at this upper level. Again, if you're using something even smaller, like a 14 millimeter lens, then realistically you can do some pretty long exposures and you're okay. Longer than you will need. So you're set. And again, like I said before, you want to bracket them, right? So, come up with your estimate, but don't just stick to one exposure. Run up and run down. The good thing with digital, it's not like film. It's not like you're having to pay to develop lots of pictures. It's like you can just take a bunch of them and throw away the ones that don't work. So, and that was just basically my 2 cents. Oh, I see someone put something in the chat and I was too busy talking.
That's just my website with some of the imagery that I've done with lunar eclipses and the moon.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I think everybody can see, hopefully everybody can see that. But again, as I know, Mark does a lot of creative stuff. I don't know, Mark, do you want to show some of them?
Unfortunately, on my laptop here, I don't have my library of photos. It's on my other hard drive on my other computer. So I don't have anything on this computer that I can show you. But like you said, those were either taken with either a 400 millimeter spotting scope, really good APO refractor, or an 8-inch or 11-inch telescope.
Yeah, the neat thing about these eclipses are you pretty much use whatever you have to hand, right? You know, and do something interesting. So yeah, I definitely encourage everybody to get out there and try to take a shot. You know, the one thing is it doesn't really work well with cell phones unless you have a telescope and you're clamping it on, trying to shoot through the eyepiece, right? But like hand holding a cell phone probably isn't going to work.
It'll be interesting to see if we have the smoke from the wildfires overhead, if how much darker it will be compared to somewhere else.
Ironically, that could make it actually look better. So yeah, that could definitely make it look better.
Yeah, you were speaking about cell phones, Ian. Last night I took that image attached to using a Celestron attacher to my eyepiece on my scope, but I also have an adapter for my tripod, and I've actually got some pretty good images of the moon with my cell phone. Doing it that way, as long as you can use it. That way you keep it steady and just use the timer on it. So
yeah, and you don't have to worry too much about tracking or anything. So even if you have kind of a wobbly, you know, scope or scope that doesn't track, you can still probably get a decent shot of the moon, right? So
how do you use the just lost.
I hear you, Tim. Oh, we were hearing you.
now, one thing I would like to learn, Ian, I guess I'm gonna have to look it up a little bit more, is the staging of photos, because I tried that last time, getting photos at a certain time. Of course, my DSL ran out of juice before, so I had to use my cell phone to get the total eclipse on January 19th. What's the best way to do that staging, or just the best thing to do is look it up?
Yeah, I can't remember how far the moon moves. Is it 15 degrees per hour? I think it's 15 degrees per hour. I want to say, I'm actually Googling it, right?
Yeah, roughly. Yeah. The rotation of the earth. Yes.
And, you know, so that gives you an idea about how to, yeah, 15 degrees per hour. And so that gives you an idea. It's a half a degree, right? So it gives you an idea. You can kind of estimate when you're doing one of those sequences. But again, probably the number one thing to do is to shoot more often than that. You know, because again, if you've got a digital camera, you can afford it. And, you know, then you can pick the ones that you want, right? So, I mean, you take a reasonable guess, but, and you can probably Google it because probably some people have advice on that, but for timing. But again, you know, definitely shoot additional ones. Then you can kind of, the main thing is you kind of want to be consistent, right? You don't want to have all these varying length gaps because then it will look kind of weird, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
have a timer set for it, good controller. Now, have you ever heard of photo pills?
I've heard of photo pills. I don't know a lot about it.
Yeah, I use it a little bit, learning more about it, but it seems like it's got some, so I'm gonna research them, see if they got some information on that.
I mean, it's not a very hard stacking process to stack all those images together. If you know, if you're going to do one of those sequences, because I mean, you're not really doing, I mean, you're basically just kind of superimposing them one on top of the other, right? Most of the software will do that if you've got Affinity or Photoshop, or you can even use GIMP.
Do you by chance know the exposures the gentleman was using when he captured the star trails with the eclipsed moon? Were they using probably what 20-second exposures, I'm guessing, with a wide field lens?
Probably something like that. I actually don't know off the top of my head.
Well, to speak of that, I've got one up on PhotoPills right now showing a guy using a Canon 60D, 17 millimeter, f is 5.6, doing 20 seconds at ISO 1000. But of course, that was just standard star trails. I've been trying to see if I can find one on the eclipse. I would think the ISO should be right around about 400 for the eclipse.
I think I said it. I think it was. I think I said it was an APOD. It might be Sky and Telescope. So, I correct for everybody watching on video, right? 16 seconds at f4, ISO
Okay.
100, and the lens was a fisheye, Nikon 15 millimeter
Okay.
fisheye.
Okay.
So again, you know, that's pretty that's some really good skill to kind of get the colors, because the colors make it kind of neat, right? So, and you can even see he even had some clouds, and that really wasn't it's like some clouds and some planes. So, but yeah, so I definitely recommend, even if you can't take pictures of it, if you could um even if you can't take pictures, just get out and look at it, because it's definitely worth doing, because it looks weird when it's got that nice, especially when in totality, you know, it looks really
Red,
dim. It's really wild.
the
So
red.
I definitely recommend you getting out and seeing it. So
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you can, if you're at a dark location and you can just see the star field just surround that eclipsed moon. It's just naked eye is just incredible. I don't even think a camera can really duplicate what your eye can see.
you know, that's absolutely true. You know, your eye is like got what, 15 stops of dynamic range or whatever, and you can pick up a lot of subtlety that you really can't. So even if you are taking pictures, definitely take some time just to look at it, because it looks cool. I mean, it looks a lot cooler than it might sound at first. When you hear it, oh, it's going to turn kind of reddish. You go, okay, great. You know, but when you look at it, it's like, that's really cool.
I will tell you that first, the one in 2019 was the first one I seen like that. And all the times, because of work or something like that, too busy, but to be able, and that was from downtown Charleston to get the image I got.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like, you don't need to be somewhere dark to look at this, right? You don't think you got to go somewhere super dark, right? It's going to be great no matter where you are. Again, like I've taken shots, like I said, you know, at a mall, in a mall parking lot, shooting over another mall parking lot with a lot of lights blazing, right? You know, it's not bad. So you know, you can get some decent I mean, you get some decent views no matter where you are. So you can be downtown, anywhere really. So it's one of the really cool things.
I got
Once
a
it,
quick,
sorry, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, my battery died when I was asking it, so I'm gonna try and ask again. What's the best way to use the cell phone to take a picture? I mean, I
Yeah,
know it's not the best.
yeah, cell phones are tough. I mean, you know,
Definitely a tripod.
I probably would, if you're going to use a cell phone, Tim, I probably would get your scope and try to shoot through the eyepiece.
Okay, but these are by hand.
You,
If you can, yeah. I mean, I don't know if you have one of those little adapters that lets you clamp your cell phone to your eyepiece.
Yeah, I was
If you
about
do,
to say I have one of those clamps that you can put right on your telescope eyepiece, and yeah, it's I got it from Celestron, I believe, and yeah, it just clamps right down to the phone if you get it lined up. It actually does have pretty decent quality. if you're,
But it's as far as what Tim was talking about, you remember Jay Lee? Jay, he can actually take good photos just putting the cell phone. I don't know how he does it, but for me, I got to have something to steady it.
If you don't have one of the adapters, Tim, I would still try to take it by hand, right? But
Yeah.
taking it by hand, just like holding it up to the sky, is going to be really hard to do. But like you can probably hold it up to the eyepiece and get a decent picture. Again, the good news is the moon is bright in the eyepiece, right?
Right.
So it's not like you're having to do like a super long exposure. So
Okay.
Tim, I have a question for you. Do you have a tripod for a camera?
I don't have no DSL cameras at all.
Okay, so you don't have it because I was saying if you had a tripod, then you can get a cell phone adapter that can go on a tripod, which holds it, and that way you can set the timer. That way you got a nice steady shot with your cell phone.
I got a little tripod laying around. I'll see if I can tape the cell phone to it.
Well, you could do that, and also just another way to steady yourself is you can butt yourself to like a wall or something like that, just to steady yourself. And another trick I was taught by an old man that actually works. If you can take some fishing twine, make it long enough to go to your foot and to your elbow, and once you pull it tight, you're gonna be steady. I never thought that would work, but it does work. I don't know if anybody ever heard of that, but it's
I haven't heard of that, but I do know that people can do amazing things. So, and again, this is one of the easiest things to shoot. So I would try it, Again, doesn't cost you anything. It's not like the old days of film when you had to pay to have a bunch of rolls developed, right?
I got one of those cameras.
Well, that was my father-in-law that taught me that. That's why he always carried around some string that he had set up to go from his foot to his elbow. And when he held his camera up and put enough attention up, steady. And I tried it and it actually works.
That probably makes sense because you're pushing against the resistance, right? You're pushing against it. So you're establishing some resistance. I never heard that, but that's interesting. So very interesting.
Well, it definitely worked.
So yeah, I definitely would encourage folks to get out there and see it. So I know, Tim, you also had a question about collimation. I think I saw come in on the list.
Yeah, last year I had to take my top of my lens off. I marked everything up where everything was and screws and where the lens was sitting. I had to get some debris out from inside the barrel of the scope, and I put it back on, and it's I can see the craters of the moon, but I can tell they're not crisp and clear.
Well, so no, the collimation might be out a little bit. Yeah, it might be out.
To you when we were at Hamilton 2 months ago. I thought it was out.
I'm sorry.
I said I mentioned that to you when we were down in Hamilton 2 months ago.
Yeah, I must have spaced. Sorry. So yeah, usually one thing about this is your C8.
Yes.
Yeah, one thing about the C8s is you kind of know when they're in collimation or at least close when you're focusing, right? Because as you're focusing, you'll be getting closer and closer and closer, and all of a sudden it'll like snap into focus. It'll be like pop. And if you see that pop, you're pretty close to collimation. If you kind of don't see that pop, then you're probably out. But it's again, if you had to pull the corrector off and put it back in, you're probably out of collimation. almost surely. It's very hard to get that corrector off and put it on without having to recollimate.
Yeah, I adjusted it before we moved down here from Pittsburgh, and I was like we were at Hamilton 2 months ago. I noticed the spikes around the stars. I was looking at the moon 2 nights ago. I can see the craters, but I can tell they're not really in focus. I mean, for the eclipse, it'll be doable, but the stars, they got spikes coming off them.
Well, one way to tend to adjust that is when you're out at night, is if you can focus onto a star far off, and that way you can adjust your collimation that way. That's what I had to do with a 10-inch Meade that I had that the club has, because it was having a hard time getting it collimated right. It got out, but once I did that, I was right on target.
Okay, I'll try star then.
because they make these little devices. I forget what they're called again, but it's called a star that you can set up at a distance.
Yeah,
I see.
the artificial stars, they work okay. They work okay, but frankly, my experience with the C8, and especially with the C11, is that we set up so far away that it's not very practical.
Mhm.
I tried doing that, and it just turned out was easier to go out in my driveway on a night when there's reasonable seeing and to tweak up the collimation from there. Certainly it does work, but
Okay,
it's just as easy to kind of tweak it up. Yeah, so definitely you go out and defocus to where you see like the airy disk pattern, basically the set of circular rings. Let's see, hold
the
on.
donut.
Yeah, hold on. Sorry, it just totally wiped you guys off my screen. So, yeah, it seems daunting, but it's really not that hard. So let's see if I could find a picture of it for you. I mean, it should be reasonable as it is, right? You're not way out. So, yeah, okay. Let me try to share my screen. I don't know if you can see that, hopefully.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is you want to defocus the star. And like there's inside and outside of focus, and the airy disk pattern will be a little bit different. So, try going one way and then go the other way until you get something that looks kind of like this, right?
Okay.
This is actually one that's in perfect collimation, right? You see how all the rings are concentric?
Yes.
And this is one that's out significantly, right? So, the reason you want to do it, when it's not too turbulent is it kind of can look like this. But even when it looks like that, you get the idea, right? Like, I mean, because if you see something like this, it's way over here, it's way out, right? So you can kind of tweak it in. And the screws, I don't know if you've got the ones you can adjust by hand or use a screwdriver.
Screwdriver.
But you can do that, and you can actually, you tighten them just a little bit, and it doesn't take much. It's actually just a little bit, right? And then you tighten them and you sort of get the mirror to change its tilt a little bit. And you kind of do that. So you want to basically get it centered, and then you want to defocus the star and make an adjustment. And a lot of times the star will jump to like one of the edges of the field. You want to recenter it, right? Because you can't keep chasing it all over, right? And just recenter it, and then try adjusting a little bit more. And so just do one screw at a time, like adjust one screw. And if it moves worse, then that's not the right thing to do, right? Then you can adjust one of the opposing screws, because there'll be 3 of them, right?
Correct. What is the full cholesterol site you're on?
It's one of their knowledge base, but there's a lot of people on the net. I'll actually put it in the chat.
Yeah, I
Okay.
put one in the chat from Arizona that they had a
Okay.
blog on about it.
Yeah, I didn't call that up just because they didn't have any pictures.
Oh, they
But yeah,
didn't?
that is a good site, Mark.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, they didn't have
Um,
the area rings you're talking about. Yeah.
And Tim, just to let you know, you can go to YouTube. Same information, just type in the type of scope you got. And YouTube uses somebody from Celestron or whoever manufacturer will come up with good videos showing you how to do your collimation.
All right. Good little info tonight.
Yeah, it can be. It's pretty easy to knock. The SCTs hold collimation pretty well, but you can knock them out. I've done it, and and you can do it when you're carrying it around and moving it around. So, I mean, you get to like a lot of people get where they periodically just check it, defocus it, and check it. and just tweak it up, even out in the field. So
Hmm.
the main thing just watch out for is if you get to the point where you can't turn a screw anymore, it's like got a lot of resistance,
Oh, yeah.
then you probably don't want to force it, right? Because you may have bottomed that screw out. Shouldn't have any screws bottomed out because that's a pretty extreme tilt.
Then you got to be
But
careful, loosen them up too, because
no, you always tighten them.
yeah, I think
Generally, with all these little motions, you tighten them. You don't loosen them up because the last thing you want to do is drop that mirror
correct.
and damage that mirror, right? You know.
Mm.
So it's weird we see spikes though. That's usually not, unless it's really far out of collimation. You shouldn't see spikes.
It's like when people take the pictures and you get the rays coming off the star. I call them spikes, but
Right, but usually that's because you got, and they take them on Newtonians or something with the spider, the
Mhm.
obstruction, and some people actually put like little pieces of thread or wire over their SCTs to actually create those spiked look.
Oh, yeah.
So, but if they're really long spikes, I'm not really sure what could be causing that. But as long
Okay.
as you pulled your corrector off, you got the right orientation. The right orientation, that's the key.
Yeah, I marked everything.
Do what?
I marked everything when I pulled it off.
Right. So you want the right orientation. You don't want to twist it, rotate it. That's the
Yeah.
key. The little cork spacers are, Celestron puts those in, but they're not super critical, right? It's mainly the rotation. Since all those are matched by hand, the correctors are matched by hand to the telescopes.
Go to this link that I just put in the chat. There's a picture about 4 posts down. Is your star looking like that in your
I
view?
don't know how to get to the chat place.
There's a chat button down at the bottom of the screen.
Well, that's a nice image there, Mark.
I'm sorry.
So that's a nice image.
Yeah, but it's extreme for an SCT. That's an extreme amount of interference in the light path.
But it's almost like in the post, they're saying like, it's like there's a piece of thread or something in there that's causing that little diffraction spike or whatever.
And
Yeah,
that may be what happened when you cleaned it, Tim. Maybe something's caught up in there. You just don't see it.
I didn't clean the lens. I had some mold was growing down in the tube itself. So I really didn't touch the lens itself. It was really clean when I took it off. So I didn't touch it because I didn't want to scratch it.
Just cleaned the back mirror, which, yeah, that 10-inch meat had mold in it. Now, could a piece of hair got down in there that you didn't see?
I don't think so. I mean, I bought it used, and there was a little bit of mold growing on the sidewall.
Yeah. I mean, first thing I would do is collimate it and check collimation, right? And then if you still continue to see that, if you get it in collimation, you still can see the spikes, then there's something in there somewhere, right? There's some kind of like spider crack or,
Yeah, I was say a little spider crack of some sort, hairline crack.
it could be, that's not very common, but it's not necessarily fatal either. But again, I get it in collimation because you want to, because collimation can cause a lot of weird things, right?
Right.
And it's easy to do, right? And again, when you move them, when you make little adjustments, it's little adjustments, like a 1/10 of a turn, right? Not
Yeah.
much, right? So it's not, you don't have to crank them. Otherwise, you'll be chasing it all day long, right?
If he's looking for that piece, he'll be able to see this. It's like that 10-inch I had. Definitely could see it.
It's definitely worthwhile. And if you're going to do any imaging, it's definitely worthwhile to get it tweaked up because it makes a huge difference. And again, when it's in, you really get that sense when you focus, you turn the focus knob, you'll see it snap into focus. And once you get it collimated, I think you'll see what I mean, right? Once you see that, it becomes pretty obvious, right? It's sort of like the focus, you'll be getting close, and all of a sudden, bang, and it becomes really noticeable. And that's how I notice when I'm starting to go out, is that starts softening up, that transition starts softening up. And I know I have to kind of get and tweak it a little bit.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the links.
No problem. It's a good it's a good thing to take out on a less than optimal night, and you say, oh, I'm going to get out and, work on my telescope a bit. So,
Okay.
but those C8s are rock solid. They're good scopes. So I wouldn't trade mine.
It's a whole lot easier collimation than that 8-inch Newtonium I got, where you got 2 mirrors.
Yeah.
Well, right. Yeah. And those need to be collimated every time you go out. Yeah.
Actually, the way I carry mine, I've never had to do it. It's stayed. Mine
I
has.
usually have to tweak mine up. I could use one for imaging. I did an 8-inch f4, and I usually have to tweak it up every time.
Yeah, I got an 8-inch f4. So, but no, it's keeping it rough because I'm very gentle on how I handle it. So.
Very
Now,
cool.
My tripod, I got an Advanced VX. Noticed last night when I was using some of the screws that came loose on me. So thank God Jim had an Allen wrench for me, and then I had another one I had to tighten down. So now I got to make sure I take tools with me, or just check it before I go out real good.
Always take tools.
Yeah.
Always take a little toolkit with you.
I got some in my case, but I didn't have the right size Allen. So now I know which one to put in there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I've got a set of Allens I carry with me because there's so many things that require them.
Yeah, I got Allen, and I got Phillips screwdriver, flat screwdrivers, a couple of wrenches in there. So just in case. Sometimes I miss my little 4-inch. It was so easy to set up. LCM, Neutronium from Celestron. But that's life. Oh, by the way, can I update you on my work on the dark skies down here?
Yes. Please.
Well, I don't, since the last time we met, I don't know if I told you, and I had a meeting April 4th with the mayor of Charleston about it. All smiles, happy face, want to take a picture with me. Said he would look into it, puts it in a drawer. A couple of weeks later, I get my paperwork back, nothing on it. But today I had a meeting with my local council member by the name of Carl Bradley. And he really didn't know much about light pollution. So we had a lunch meeting, and I discussed things with him, gave him some information. So he's going to try to put it on the committee meeting for June about setting up about a life issue for it, because he said the way Charleston is, if you want to talk about pollution, they don't want to hear that. But if you talk about a life issue like noise ordinance or something like that, then they're all ears for it. So he figured he'd take it in there. So we'll see how it goes. And also down here at, I don't know if you've ever been to our dark site down here at Moat Hall.
No, I haven't had a chance to get down there.
Well, it's not so much dark anymore because now they got like 2,500 homes going nearby. And I spoke with the people there, and they really didn't know much except the guy that's running the place. His name's Jeff. He said they got a few environmentalists that's kind of concerned about the lights and stuff because of turtles and wildlife at night. So I spoke to him, gave him my information, and he's going to check, see what he can do about getting the lights. They're already shielded, but doing a better job on it down there and getting with the right Kelvin. So it's a hard fight. A lot of people, they just don't want to deal with it. And I can just imagine what you guys would have up there, that tourist attraction y'all have, all that light pollution.
Yeah. So hold on one second, Tom. So I'm going to stop the live stream there.
Okay.
And so thanks everybody who's watching on the live stream or watching it